Hi, I'm Veronica and welcome to my channel. Today I would like to show you how you could move from your midline, from the center of you, and what does it really change, how much of the lightness and ease of movement and a far more balanced use of various body parts you can gain thanks to this. There's also something really centering and grounding in terms of your emotions if you focus more on your center. If you haven't done that already, please subscribe and hit the bell for receiving all the notifications about the upcoming videos. You won't need anything for this session apart from some space and something to lie down on the ground. I would invite you first to make your way down onto the ground and resist maybe that temptation to lie down flat and completely immobile straight away. But rather than that, just give yourself some time to settle first. I always invite you to do it to begin with because it really helps you to settle in a much more comfortable way. You can sink much deeper into the earth if you give it some time and if you make some micro adjustments first. So feel free to make any movements that are intuitive for you, that just feel good and make you more relaxed into that lying down position. And we're going to choose a position that might not necessarily feel that comfortable to begin with. And that is that exposed shape of a letter X. So just before we get there, because sometimes it might feel like too much too soon, you can place your hands over your abdomen so that you can start connecting with that center. And you might notice that your hands are moving in the rhythm of your breath, that there is an expansion every time you inhale, and then the belly softens and settles down towards the floor when you exhale. So make sure that that exhalation is passive, that there is no squeezing of the belly, no pushing out the air, anything like that. It's really not necessary. And go for the felt sense of that area in front, like the skin of your belly, and the area on the back that is now touching the ground, somewhere around maybe the back of the pelvis. And let's say that space is maybe in between of your pubic bone and the belly button, somewhere midway between the two. And exactly in the midline of your body in terms of right and left. And right in the middle of you in terms of the front and the back of the body. So let your attention dive into that spot right in the middle of your belly. And then you can gently start inviting your limbs to start moving away from that center, away from the midline. And maybe you don't want to do it all at once, so it could be a tiny bit more every time you inhale, reaching slightly farther away, until eventually you land in the X shape or something like a starfish with your legs out to the side Arms a little bit up and out to the sides. It might feel a little bit overwhelming, a bit exposed. But check if you can stay with it. And come back to that visualization of the point right in your lower belly. And we're going to go through the visualization first. And it is quite useful because it really does help you to map various parts of the body into your brain. So first imagine that you're taking a breath that your breath can initiate, of course, it's just the visualization, that your breath can initiate from that point in your lower abdomen, and that you can send it all the way down to the spine, which in this case is a very short way, just till the end of your tailbone. And then when you exhale, send it back to that point in the middle of the abdomen. Okay, and then let's just check what would be the journey of that breath up the spine. So visualize that you begin it in the lower abdomen, and then that breath travels upwards along the spine, all the way to the top of the head, and then it travels down. And you can even create that visual path. You could imagine the actual anatomy, or you could imagine just like a thread or some line or the ray of light or whatever works for you. Stay with the visualization that is going to be easiest for you to connect with. So once we have these two ends, the tail and the top of the head, let's add to that. Let's connect to the extremities, to the four limbs. So next time you inhale, imagine that you're inhaling from that point in the lower belly, and then you send that breath first to your hip, and then you're gonna send it down your leg. So you're gonna send it down your thigh, through the knee, through the lower leg, all the way to the toes. And you're kind of following with your awareness all that pathway to your toes. And then when you exhale, that exhalation returns the same way through your leg, hip, all the way to that point in the lower abdomen. And then let's do that with the other side. So that breath begins somewhere. Imagine that it begins in your lower belly and that you can move it. And you can have any visualization you need down the left hip, left thigh, knee, left calf and foot, all the way to the toes of the left foot. And then when you exhale, that exhalation returns to that point in your lower abdomen. Now we're gonna connect to the arms. So this time, imagine that that breath begins in that lower abdomen and travels up the spine, but it travels only to your sternum. And once it reaches your breastbone, it turns right along the collarbone and then through your right shoulder, down the right arm, elbow, forearm, hand, all the way to the fingertips. And then when you exhale, it returns the same way. Really visualize that pathway with the fingers, palm, forearm, upper arm, and then returning via collarbone to the spine, all the way down to that point in the lower abdomen. So it's quite a long way. And then let's try that on the other side. The breath rises up the spine and then turns via the collarbone through the shoulder, down the arm to the fingers, and then returns the same way without missing any section. So this is the connection with those 6 points: top of the head, tail, two limbs. And you can try sending that breath from the center outwards to all points at the same time. Down the legs, up the arms, up and down the spine. And then let it return all towards the midline. And you could now start adding up the actual movement of expanding a little bit more through all those 6 points when you inhale. And then letting it release slightly when you exhale. Expanding through all 6 points when you inhale. Initiating from the belly. And then starting to bring everything back in towards that midline, towards the belly, coming up. Oh, coming very, very close, turning more into a ball. You could do that a couple of times. Maybe you need a few rounds of breaths. Maybe you want to go all in just one go, expanding outwards. When you inhale and gather to the midline as you exhale. Keeping the limbs quite soft. Remembering that you're not starting this movement from moving the arms or somewhere from, even not from the shoulders, but really kind of sucking everything in from the center and expanding from the center outwards, not reaching the arm first, not creating any kind of isolated, unconnected movement, but really letting this travel through you, extending, expanding in all directions, and then let it all come back in. And after a couple of these, you can rest in a constructive rest again with your knees bent and feet on the mat. Staying with the breath to the abdomen without losing the connection with it. And we're going to use now that created connection to make the movements that maybe normally are quite challenging for you much lighter and easier. So let's try to do some balancing, but coming from that middle line, from that point in the center of you. So you can land first in all fours, and here be aware of all points of support. So you have the even support through all 4 limbs. Think of it like the 4 columns that give you that full support. So there's no sinking into just your joints, no collapsing into the wrists or the knees, but rather getting that full support through the entire surface of the palms and the lower legs. And then find your other 2 points of reference, the top of the head and the tail. You might even imagine this a connection, some gentle tugging at both ends. And then find your midline, that point in the center in your lower belly. So that every time you're gonna make a movement, it's gonna initiate from the middle of you rather than from the extremity, from your limb. And think of a way how you could start moving one leg behind you, but starting that from the belly, from that lower abdomen, and without losing the connection to all the remaining 6 limbs. How these other 3 points of contact still give you a lot of support, and how that movement really can travel from the belly all the way out. And then you could see how that would work with the upper body, if getting that connection all the way to the belly is hard, you could also think of starting more from your sternum, but definitely not from your fingers, not from your elbow, not even from the shoulder itself. It's from the midline. And the same way that we were curling and uncurling in the lying down position, we can think of doing the similar movement in that different relation to the gravity. So now adding a little bit more of a work, maybe, but still, as it comes from the midline, it's not, the limbs are not as heavy as usual. You could add a little bit of rounding and gathering, coming all in when you exhale, and that inhalation travels the same way as we were doing when we were lying down, from that lower belly outwards and outwards. And you could still have a contact with the ground with your limbs, or maybe you notice that at some point you start floating. So there is an expansion, but it's not a reach, the disconnected reach, the desperate reach, trying to reach as far as possible, both with the arm and with the leg. That's when you start losing the connection with the center. It's the movement that travels from the midline outwards, and there is a looseness and lightness in both the arm and the leg as you do that, and there's still a communication and full awareness of where is the top of the head and where is the tail with that. So you could try that a few times. Curling, uncurling from the center outwards. And obviously, as we've done one diagonal, you could do exactly the same on the other diagonal line. And it's good to go gradually so that you can feel how the movement can start from the lower belly. And then the leg is just a kind of continuation. The leg lift is a continuation of that movement, not a separate movement that is disconnected from the rest. So once you have that stable support without sinking, without pushing away, without any extra tension, the belly is quite soft here. You don't need to suck it in or anything like that. And then there is a connection between the top of the head and the tail. From here, you could think of little adjustments with how you shift the weight, and that movement that really starts from the belly as the leg travels back. It might be first touching the ground, and maybe after a while you might start floating, and it doesn't really float too high, so there might be this curling and bringing everything in as you gather, as you bring that knee towards you. But the other way, you don't really need the arch, you don't need to make any big movement here. That's an unnecessary effort, and that big dip in the spine would actually create a bit of a disconnect. So once you felt how it would work with the leg, you could give the leg a little bit of rest and then check how far down that movement of extending the arm can start. How it would be to begin it, not with your hands, not even with your shoulder, but really somewhere at least from your sternum, if not even lower, somewhere from your midline. And once you've got that, there's going to be this curling and an uncurling, retraction and expansion movement. So when you curl, you really curl the knee towards the elbow, elbow towards the knee. And then that movement starts from the middle of you and extends outward with quite light and relax both arm and the leg. And there's an gathering and on inhalation, expansion, as if the breath itself was also making that force travel outward through the body. And then you can land again. So this is just one of many examples of how you could make every movement initiate from the midline. And it doesn't even need to be necessarily always from your lower belly, though in many cases this is very useful. But you could also think of the midline itself, so that when you lift your arms, for example, it's not really the effort of that much of an effort of lifting, using all these muscles in the arms to make that happen. And then this is like completely isolated movement of the arm itself. Lots of tension, lots of engagement here for the arm to lift. I can really feel that it's a lot of effort if I don't connect it with my breath and if I don't connect it to the center. So the breath here can be a big aid, because every time you inhale, it will move the entire rib cage together with the shoulder girdle, so that you can ride on that movement. You know, you don't really need to make this effort all with the muscles. You can really use that moment when the breath itself starts moving your bones. So you could imagine that your arms actually start at the sternum. They're like wings coming from your sternum. And you can wait for that moment when you start feeling that outward expansion that happens just because you breathe. And you only build up on that. You follow that natural movement of the whole rib cage together with the shoulder girdle, letting the arms float, literally float out and up. So that when they're up, there's no reaching. You can see I'm not tensing my arms. They're really heavy in the shoulder joints. There is a space in the elbows, in the wrists, in all the joints here. And then when I exhale, it can lower. So it's really waiting for that moment when the breath itself allows that arm to float, and then it releases as the chest also drops when you exhale. Coming from the very middle of you, from the midline. Using that inhalation to do most of the job. So I hope that this has been useful for you, and that you can utilize this idea of moving from your midline and from the center, so that the movement is not so full of tension and effort, and that it becomes a whole body movement. And you might notice that you're actually habitually using far more effort and far more tension in the muscles than is necessary. So my intention is to show you the way where you can really connect to your core, to that center, which is very stable and which allows you for a lot of freedom in the rest of the body. So I hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to like it, to subscribe, and hit notification button. And I will see you next week. Thank you very much.